Hi friends, my name is Bhavya Mangla. I'm IATF qualified auditor doing audit for the automotive sector for the last 18 years. I'm again back with a very interesting topic that is about corrective action implementation. It's a series going on of the 7 steps of problem solving. So I'm going to today talk about specifically about step number 4 about corrective action plan. Well, if you see in our day-to-day life, we do take a lot of corrective actions. So, for example, you are going to an office for the first time, a new route, and then you find some traffic there. So, what you will do? Maybe next day, you will not go from that route, you will find an alternate route and you go by that. So, it's a sort of a corrective action. But when we talk in terms of an organization, that corrective action may not be limited to one person, but it is impacting many people. So we need to see that the corrective action should be comprehensive and it should be linked with the exact root cause why it is happening. So if you remember correctly, I talked about the 7-step process, wherein the first step was about defining the problem correctly. The second step was about correction, containment, and the interim action. The third step is with respect to the root cause analysis. The fourth step, for which I am going to talk today, is in detail about the corrective action implementation. The fifth one is talking with respect to the effectiveness evaluation, that whatever actions that we have taken, whether they are actually effective or not. The sixth one is talking about the horizontal deployment. And the seventh one is talking about documentation, lesson learned, and the promotion awareness. So when I'm going to talk with respect to the corrective action implementation, I'm going to talk in 3 ways. The first, I'm going to talk about what exactly is the purpose of corrective action. Then what are the different steps that we can take as a part of corrective action. And then thirdly, we are going to take example with respect to the root causes and then the possible corrective action as a live example that what can be done. And lastly, I'm going to talk about some of the industry challenges that we are going to face. So let's start first what exactly maybe the key purposes for taking the corrective action. So when we talk about corrective action, the main purpose is to prevent its recurrence. That is the key most. The second one is to make sure that whatever is a workflow, it can be streamlined again because there is some problem which happened earlier. Then it's also important to make sure that whatever actions that we are taking, they are cost effective and it should lead to correction of that particular problem. The next one is it should also improve the manufacturing processes or the method that we are following. And certainly it's very important that whenever we are taking any corrective action, it should lead into improvement in the effectiveness and efficiency of the processes. And then it should help to eliminate or maybe to control the practices, the wrong practices which were happening earlier so that things can be taken care earlier. And lastly and very important, it should also help to make sure that whatever actions that we are taking, they are appropriate to the non-conformities that are coming. So that brings point number 2, that what can be the possible steps that we can take with respect to the corrective action plan. So let's start with the first one. The first one is talking about the risk assessment. We need to assess that what is the impact of this problem so that our action plan should be commensurate with respect to that. Then it should work on the 3 legs that we talked about the occurrence, why the problem happened, then what was the reason that why it was not detected, and the third one, what was the systemic failure. So our corrective action should be based on all 3. And after this, I'm going to talk about the example with respect to all 3 about occurrence, detection, and systematic causes. Then wherever needed, we need to do a simulation study. The purpose of simulation study is to see that why this problem has happened, and if we simulate the situation again, how the problem can come so that we can take an action so that the problem should not repeat again. Then it's also important that whatever action that we are proposing, that should be feasible. It should not happen that we find it difficult to implement. And then there should be some time frame within which it can be implemented, because if it is related to the customer is not going to wait for a long time. So we need to make sure that things are happening within the certain time frame. Then whenever we are defining the action plan, we need to also identify the person who will be responsible for implementing it. And that person name and designation and other things should be very clearly defined so that everyone knows that what exactly they need to do. Then we also need to define a time frame, because different actions will have different time frames. Some actions may be completed in 2 days, some may require a week, 10 days, some may require even 3 months. So we need to define the time frame that when each and every action that we are defining based on the root cause, when it's going to be completed. When we are doing that, it's also important because it's a running organization and regularly we are doing some production and material may be at different stages. So whenever we are defining a corrective action plan, what happened to the material which is in transit, which is already at the customer end, which may be coming from the supplier. So we need to identify the quantity and then we need to communicate to the customer or maybe internally that, okay, after this much of quantity, we are going to take this particular action. Then we also need to see that what are the different kind of documents that need to be reviewed. It may start from the process flow chart, then FMEA, control plan, work instruction, and there could be many different kind of documents which needs to be reviewed and updated based on that. Then it's also important that whenever we are taking action, we may need to impart training maybe to the operator, maybe to the supervisor, or it could be the suppliers also. So wherever the training is required, maybe on-job training or a classroom training, we need to identify that. And as and when required, there may be a cases where customer is getting impacted by whatever actions that we are going to take. So before implementing any action, we need to talk to the customer, take their approval. Okay, we are doing this particular thing. We are maybe changing the material or maybe changing the procedure or sequence or a machine. So whether you agree to that or not. So that is also very important to that. And then when we are taking any action, it's pertinent to understand that whatever new actions that we are implementing, the material at different stages should be properly identified and there should be a traceability mechanism so that we know that, okay, from this particular batch number, this invoice number, this date, this particular new material has been introduced so that everyone can track that and see the effective implementation of that particular corrective action. Then whenever we are taking some corrective action, unless and until we are communicating to all the relevant stakeholders, there is always a problem that the problem can repeat again if the people are not communicated. Say for example, we are taking some action, we are actually not communicating to the operator who is working on a lathe machine or maybe a CNC machine. So if they are not aware, there is a possibility that similar kind of action can come again. So effective communication to all the stakeholders is key to that. And then in many cases, especially in the automotive sector, the customer has defined their own prescribed formats and the methodology. Maybe like a 8D format, or maybe there can be different kind of format which are designed by the customer. So wherever it is a requirement from the customer side, we need to make sure that we need to implement only those formats. That brings step number 3. So here I'm going to talk about the 3 whys. If you remember in the previous video, I talked about 3 leg 5 analysis, wherein we talked about why this problem has happened. Then if the problem has happened, why it was not detected, and thirdly, what was the systemic failure. So I will take that example further and whatever the 3 root causes that came out with respect to the occurrence, detection and the systematic failure. Now we'll try to see with an example that what can be the possible corrective action that we can take. So let's first take the example with respect to the occurrence. So if you see the sheet on the left hand side on the bottom, we define the final root cause, and that root cause is with respect to the different leaks which has resulted in this particular failure with respect to the torque. So what can be the possible corrective actions that organization can take? First of all, they can reset the machine and they can disable the machine. They can make a feature in the machine whenever the pressure drops. Say for example, we have defined 6 bar. So if the pressure goes beyond 6 bar, automatically the machine should stop. That can be one possible action. Then there can be a in-process inspection process where we can check the process in the beginning of the shift, in the middle and in the end. And then maybe as a part of monitoring, we can review that pressure for next 30 days and after that we can decide whether we need to continue to do that or we can stop that. So these are some of the possible actions that we can take. Now let's take second leg. Here we are talking about detection, that why that problem has happened. So if you remember in our last video, we identified that the key root cause with respect to detection is with respect to the process capability study, that the process capability study is not reflecting about the special causes which is resulting in the variation, and that's why it could not be detected earlier. So what can be the possible corrective actions? So the first is 100% sorting for the chamfering length and the taper length, thread damage that can be done. Secondly, we can create an inspection log sheet to validate that now whether everything is within the specification or not. We can redesign the chamfer gauge so that it should give the right value and there should not be any variation in the result that is coming. Maybe the inspection frequency can be increased, or we can do a machine capability study to see that whether actually machine is performing correctly or not, or we can also do a process capability study on the chamfer diameter, and the intent is to see that whether it is giving the right result or not. That can be another thing that can be done. Now coming to the third thing, which is about the systemic failure. Now, we also did the root cause analysis with 5 why, and the final why that came out was related to the insufficient evaluation of machining process and the related severity levels during the APQP process. That was the final root cause we identified. So what can be the possible action that we can take? One is that we can review our design records, FMEA, and the controls, that we can review it again and then we can update it as per the requirement. Maybe we can review our control plan and we can reflect that 100% inspection can be done for the special characteristics. Or maybe as a part of systemic review, we can introduce a layered process audit to standardize our workflow to verify that whether things are going as per the requirement or not. So these can be some possible ways in which we can implement the corrective action. Now, to talk about some of the key industry challenges which the industry is facing. The first and the foremost is that whenever we are writing our corrective action plan, whether it is actually based on the 3 legs, that is occurrence, detection and the systematic failures or not, that is something to be seen. Secondly, whenever we are making our corrective action plan, are we taking the action with respect to the root causes which was actually found, or we just do it based on our conviction or our easiness? And the third and the most important thing is that whenever we are writing a corrective action plan, is it based on the actual root cause that was identified or not? So if I do a summary, I talked about the corrective action plan, that how we can do that, what is the purpose with respect to that, what can be the different steps that can be taken. Then we talked about the 3 cases with respect to the why analysis, with respect to occurrence, detection and systematic failure and the possible corrective action. And last, we talked about the possible industry changes that we are all facing. My next video will be in this same series, and there we are talking about step number 5. How effectively that a corrective action has been implemented, how we can monitor that. That will be the next video with respect to that. Well, regularly I'm getting a lot of feedback from your side and they're helping me to understand your expectation. So please do continue that. And in case you want to understand about this particular video a little bit more in detail, so if you see there's a link below, if you click that, you will find a blog there, and there you will find this information in much more detail. And in case you are liking these kind of videos and blogs, you can always share with your friends and colleagues, and you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, my website, bhavyamangla.com. Thank you.